Austin Moulder. I am a former WashU Olin MBA, was 2020 to 2022, had my internship at ZS Associates, worked at BCG as a senior associate and consultant for about 2 years, and now am working at Cohort as the head of partnerships. It's a global admissions consulting business. So we try to make college admissions guidance affordable for all by taking the price tag and cutting it in 10. So that's a little bit background about me. A little bit of background about this class is that we are focused on making, bringing you from level 1 in the case preparation space, which is just knowing like the structure and overview of what a case is and how it operates. That's what we talked about last week. And pushing us all the way to being an expert in cases, knowing the secret sauce tactics, knowing about affiliation and negotiation strategy, and really being able to get those reps in on all the different types of cases. So today, we're going to talk about something a little bit different than Wednesday. So on Wednesday, we talked about the structure of the case. We talked about basics of case interviewing and basics of fit interview. And today, we are going to be talking about essential frameworks. So what do I mean whenever I talk about essential frameworks? These are the building blocks that you should have memorized for the entirety of your case journey. That does not mean that you should cookie cutter use these frameworks whenever you're in the interview itself. It's kind of like learning how to walk before you can learn how to run. They're not the same, but if you don't know how to run, you're not going to be able to know how to walk. Or if you don't know how to walk, you're not going to be able to know how to run. So this is walking. These are frameworks that are incredibly cookie cutter. They are incredibly copy and paste, and it'll work in 99% of instances. And it will probably get you past the preliminary interview round for not top companies, right? And what I mean by not top companies is in terms of like the most sought after companies. That's what I mean. It will get you the right answer most of the time, but it will be an incomplete right answer. So why am I even sharing these types of frameworks? Well, one, it's a really great introduction into how you're going to start casing. Two, it's going to be your fallback option if you really have no idea what to do whenever you get a really complicated case. And three, it actually can be nuanced to create more unique frameworks based off of these cliches that will then yield really, really nice results in some like double-treed frameworks that you don't see too often, but are becoming increasingly necessary to answer some of these more complex questions that are finding their way into casing. And all of that is possible from thinking about first principles compounded with some of these cliche frameworks. So that is what I mean whenever I say essential frameworks. So with that in mind, I would love, I'm just going to take a quick 15 to 20 second break, would love for you all to put in the chat, what is the role of frameworks as you see them? What do you think that they seek to accomplish? This will be a quite interactive day. So I'm looking forward to getting as much information from you all as possible, hopefully build up your case skills. Structure your answers. I love it. I love it. That's absolutely true. Structure and direction. Okay, maybe one more, and then we will talk a little bit more about it. I'm really glad that we got this, definitely the buckets, absolutely. I'm really glad that we got this mic thing figured out. It was because on this Elgato, I had the mute button pressed, which you can't actually see here because it shows that the mic's working, but I actually like muted the mic itself. So glad that we got that figured out. Okay, structure your answer, give structure and direction, and bucketing. Okay, this is 1000% correct. Y'all are on the same page. What is the role of the framework? Three main things I would identify, which is structure. Like, we cannot say that word enough. Structure for the rest of the interview. So it's going to be giving you your guardrails. So that way you don't go completely off in a crazy direction with your line of thinking. That seems pretty obvious, and all three of you all said something along the lines of giving structure and direction in the chat. But it's a lot harder in practice. And what I mean by that is the biggest issue that folks will run into whenever they start casing is that they'll speak in a stream of consciousness, which stream of consciousness thinking is really great for inspiring creativity, but it's a really horrible way to run a case. So if you're trying to communicate executive presence, executives don't speak in a stream of consciousness. If you think about why executives aren't speaking in a stream of consciousness, it's because they don't want to say something wrong and then be on the hook for it, right? To have a whole PR nightmare on their hands. Well, we want to do the same thing. We want to make sure that everything that we say is being said with intention, and we can only say that whenever we have frameworks and whenever we have structure to all of our answers, okay? The second thing is outline thinking for the problem presented. So there's one thing to say that you're creating your guardrails for the case, but then also within those guardrails, you're providing an outline for how you're going to think about the problem. This is the same idea of like there are a lot of different ways to, what do they say, eat an elephant. I would just say there are a lot of different ways to cut a pie, right? So it depends on if you want 2 buckets, if you want 3 buckets, if you want 4 buckets, and what those buckets are going to contain. And are they MECE, which is something that we'll talk a little bit about today, which is mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. This is a buzz phrase that exists across all of consulting, so you definitely want to know MECE, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, and that's almost a fundamental requirement for all frameworks. And then demonstrate a clear and logical flow of ideas. So think about structure as the guardrails around the problem. Think about your outline as the way in which you cut the pie within the guardrails that you presented, and then demonstrating clear and logical flow of ideas is how do you get from one bucket to another, and how do these actually connect? Okay, so that is the role of the framework in these cases. The next thing that I want to talk a little bit about is why frameworks are important, which I think sounds, a little bit woo-woo, like let's get to the content, but I really want to emphasize why we do this, because one, it gives you a good primer onto like why consulting is important, but then two, frameworks exist not just because someone said they exist because they're actually a really good idea in answering most problems. So even in my current work now, I actually work with 3 former consultants, so 2 former BCGers and then an ex-Bain individual in the startup that I'm building. And we use frameworks all the time, right? There are a lot of great use cases for the things that you learn in consulting in entrepreneurship. As I said last time, there are also a lot of bad things that do not cross over well at all and that should be completely just disregarded and thrown by the wayside. Frameworks is not one of them. Frameworks is useful in just about any single thing that you go into, which is why I suggest that even if you're not interested in consulting or your friends are not interested in consulting, get them into this program and get them into attending these sessions, because it's going to help them with their interviews. So why are frameworks important? I'm going to present you three answers. It's guiding your line of thinking, so thinking about that logical flow of ideas, so you're going to be able to focus on the right questions. The second thing is it shows your ability to predict and hypothesize solutions before even seeing the data. This point, I believe, is like very much slept on. Unless you're a top caser. So if you're, starting to think that this is a little bit slow, I would point you to like, what does the ability to predict and hypothesize before you get data even look like? And how can you create a framework to answer that? A perfect example that we'll talk about that is a nice little secret sauce tactic is that a lot of prompts that you will hear have lists within the prompt. So we'll talk about what that means in a second, and I'm giving you a little bit of a teaser for whenever you start your first case with us. But let's say, you've got this sandwich shop that's trying to grow its revenue, and it offers a range of products from salads to sandwiches to hot drinks to smoothies, okay? and they're seeing a decline in revenue that they don't know what to do, and they want to increase their ultimately their profits. Okay, something like that. Well, you can use your framework as a guide that actually is influenced by the prompt given. Notice I kind of ran through this list of smoothies and hot drinks and sandwiches. So that was a list, and 99% of casers are just going to be like, oh, this is not useful information. I'm just going to write down the numbers. I'm going to write down the main problem and my synthesis, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But actually, lists are incredibly important data points, because think about it this way. They put that prompt together. Someone actively spent time building out that prompt to build out this case, which means that every piece of information is somewhat important. And whenever you hear that list in the prompt, you can actually use that to recognize that there's probably going to be something around a portfolio problem. Because why does it matter that they sell smoothies, but also hot drinks, but also sandwiches? There's probably going to be something that's performing better or worse than the other, because they're not all the same product. So that is going to allow you to go into your framework and to make an entire bucket around the portfolio mix, and how much money, how much capital, how much marketing spend you should allocate to each one of these products. And that is a really keen way to predict and hypothesize solutions before seeing the data. And you can bet your bottom dollar that one of the either creative questions or quantitative questions is going to be a chart or graph of the portfolio mix and breakdown, or it's going to be a creative question saying, what are some additional types of items that this company could sell in order to increase their revenue? And if you already have that as a bucket, then they're going to be really impressed, because you're getting brownie points for actually knowing what the case is about to ask. Okay, and that is important for consultants, because it shows our ability to work with ambiguous situations, and it shows our ability to have really good intuition as to what are the root problems. So that's what I mean by ability to predict. And then frameworks signal your ability to think both broadly and narrow. This is important because whenever you think about a framework at the most basic level, you have your 3 buckets, I would say, is the basic answer to how many buckets. And then within these 3 buckets, you have sub-points, okay? That's important because the buckets at the high level are incredibly broad. Ideally, they're meaty, but they don't give you enough context or enough specifics to really provide any type of fodder or good information for the client. And if you just stayed at those big buckets, then you are gonna be very consulting fluffy language throughout the rest of the interview, and that's not actually a value add for the client. It's these sub buckets and these sub points that we're going to talk about that allow you to narrow your thinking. Okay, so that is why frameworks are important. Now let's hop into the 3 fundamental frameworks that we're going to talk about today. So we've got the 4 P's of marketing, we've got Porter's 5 forces, and the 8 big buckets. Before I go on to the next slide, which talks about the 4 P's of marketing, I would love, because I know that all of you all have taken marketing management, and I would suspect that some of you all have taken Michael Wall's Innovative Products and Services. Let me know what the 4 P's of marketing are as you see them, or what you think that they might be. These are 4 areas of marketing, and they all start with the letter P. And they relate to how you can engage in successful marketing practices. So what are some things that might be important whenever you think about marketing? Remember, this is the time to get answers wrong, because there is no consequence here. Yep, that's 1. That's 2. That's 3. Can we get the 4th one? There it is, knocking it all out. We love it. Price, product, promotion, and place. That's exactly right. So this should not be a surprise to most MBAs. The surprise is that these buckets are quite useful in consulting interviews. So that's my hope, is that I can take a lot of what you all learned in your MBA fundamentals and just connect the dots. Because as I'm sure you figured out, and maybe might be even a little bit frustrated by, a lot of the studies and practices and homework in these MBA classes are quite academic in nature. You're doing a lot of case studies, and case studies are great, but they're necessary but insufficient. So it's one thing to know the 4Ps. It's another thing to know how to operationalize them in a case study, and then ultimately actually in a business where you're actually running the Google ads and you're running the meta ads and you're engaging in promotions and discounting and affiliate marketing and cold outreach and all of this kind of stuff, and like where are you going to do it, and like all of that can funnel into this framework. So we're going to go through this real quick, just tackling all four, and I'll give you some fodder as to where this might place. But whenever we get to the final framework, I'll actually show you how to present the framework at large. So I understand that these are going to be a little bit abstract. 4Ps of marketing, we're going to start off on product. Whenever we think about product, we're thinking about the physical product or service that is being offered. So I would think about, if you've ever taken Doug Villiard's class on Introduction to Entrepreneurship, he gives about 7 or 8 different types of ways in which you can differentiate a product. And it's a really important class. So if you haven't taken that class, I would highly recommend it. Tell Doug that I said hi. He was one of my favorite professors. And some of the things that he talks about is that you can differentiate on features, you can differentiate on quality, you can differentiate on service, you can differentiate on price, which we'll talk about in a second. But those 7 or 8 things are what you want to have in the back of your mind, because if entrepreneurs are thinking about it, it's probably good for creating like rapid ideation. What do I mean when I say features? If you're working with a wallet, the classic example that Doug ends up using in his class is that there are so many different facets to this wallet, right? So you've got the double fold or the trifold, you've got the pockets. For this one, it's a minimalist wallet, so if you press this, you can actually slide up your cards. You've got this band, which actually holds cash or something of value. You've got the stitching on the outside. You've got the type of leather. All of these types of facets of a wallet make it truly unique and command the markup that it has. Right, so there's a reason that some products and some wallets cost $150 and some cost $20. And it's because of the quality and as well as the features. So one of the features would be like the super thin stitching. I don't know if you can see. There we go. The super thin stitching that happens in this nice little logo. But like another thing is actually the quality of the stitching. See how none of it's fraying? Right? This is actually the second wallet that I have of Exter, because the first one, the stitching was good. It started to get a little bit bad after a while, but the actual trigger that opens up all of the cards, it broke, right? Which wasn't super helpful because then it defeats the whole purpose of the product. So that would be an issue of quality. But the great thing is that they had a guarantee in that if it broke within 2 years, which it did, I would get a completely new one sent to me. And that made me really happy because I love this product. I just hate that it broke. So I'm trying to be a little bit more careful with it. That is what product is, and this is a very real example. So if one of your buckets is talking about the product, like you're working with a wallet manufacturer, like you're working with Exter, and they're seeing declining revenues, you might have a bucket around the product and analyzing it and saying, okay, so let's look at some of the features and quality of this product. If we notice a defect that's happening with more than 20 to 30% of our customers, but it's happening at year 4 in the data, then they might be frustrated because we're seeing a lot of customer service requests that aren't being replaced with a warranty. So we need to change our guarantee, which may decrease our margins because we're having to make 2 2 for every customer, but we may increase our customer lifetime value, right? That is just throwing a lot of nice information that's super useful that could really bolster a bucket than just saying we should look at product because product is important and we want to know how our wallets are doing, which is how a lot of case answers go. Okay. Notice I threw in some understanding of profit, of service, of guarantees, and of customer lifetime value. Okay. Packaging is like the secret 5th P that people will talk about a lot. I think a lot of packaging just has to do with brand, but I do think that it's a little bit too narrow to validate as a 5th bucket. So like they did here, I normally put it in with product. Like I said, there are a lot of different ways to cut the pie, so maybe that's a totally separate one. On to price. So price is actually one of Doug's 7 features or 7 areas in which a product can be differentiated. But price is interesting, and I do think it deserves its own bucket because price is the final playing field of differentiation, as Doug puts it. Because if you're fighting on price, then you're really entering into what's starting to look like a perfectly competitive market. So you think about John Horn's class on managerial economics, and whenever you have a perfectly competitive market, where is the battlefield? The battlefield is on cost leadership, where all of these goods are commoditized, and you are now fighting on who can create more economies of scale quicker, such that they can offer their price lower, and that is how they stay competitive. And that's not good, because if you know anything about perfectly competitive markets, the limit of that perfectly competitive market is where the profit essentially equals 0, right? Because it just fights all the way down to where you're offering your product at cost. So you ultimately have to find other ways to differentiate, but that is what happens with perfectly competitive markets. So that's a little bit about price. There are a lot of different ways in which you can pay for something. So that is also a nuance that a lot of people forget whenever they talk about price. So you can offer payment terms is probably the most common way in which, let's say that you're offering your product to a lower income demographic and they don't have all of the cash on hand for maybe a high ticket item. A good example of this would actually be, ironically, like Cohort, for example. So the business that I run right now, we are offering what has historically been a $6,000 product for $600. Okay, so we are fighting on price, right? Which is not always the sexiest place to be in, because you want to fight on other things. But it's a great way, I think, to scale a business from scratch, because people don't like to put money in things that they don't 100% have their trust in. So there's like even more nuance to it there. But a lot of lower income folks would never use private college guidance because, one, they don't know that it exists, or two, they assume that they can't afford it, right? So we're offering at 1/10 of the price. Whenever we do that, we open up the floodgates to a lot of people that are interested, that are intending to buy the $6,000 product and then find out that the $600 product is actually just as good, if not better. But there are some folks that were never considering the $6,000 product, and they want the $600 product, but they don't have $600 laying around because, more than 50% of people making over $100,000 are living paycheck to paycheck, right? So like, it's a lot of these stats where it's like some people just don't have $600 lying around. So we actually offer payment terms as well, which is you can pay the one-time fee of $600, which entitles you to a 6-month service package, or you can pay $100 per month for 6 months. Okay, and the reason that we do this is because it lowers the investment on the side of the customer, It opens the ability for people who do not have the purchasing power to partake in the product, and it reinforces the trust with our guarantee, which is that if you don't like it in the first month, you can get your money back, a full refund. And you can do that with the $600 product too, but there's a lot less investment and a lot less skin in the game for the customer if they only have to put down $100. Okay, so that's some really interesting ways in which you can think about price. I'm giving these super specific examples because it's the super specific examples that actually make things come to life. And if you can do that with cases, people are going to love to interview you because every other MBA consultant, like not just Olin, but like even Harvard MBAs and Wharton MBAs and Kellogg MBAs are just speaking into the ether about product, price, place, and promotion. And it's kind of like being on a wheel. It's just not an enjoyable experience. So that's price. Place is a couple of different things. So you can think about place in terms of geography. If you are selling in the United States versus if you're selling in India, you can think about it in terms of shelf space. So are you placed on the top shelf? Are you placed on the bottom shelf? Or are you placed in the prime shelf, which is right below eye level? So if you've ever taken, was it Sydney Scott? I think it was her class, but I could be, or Nora? I think it might have been Nora. She taught the consumer psychology class where you actually find out what is the most optimal place to put a product on a shelf. And the answer is not actually at eye level, it's one below eye level because we don't always look, as I'm doing directly now because I'm presenting to a camera, but whenever we walk, we don't look directly in front of us. We actually have our head just a little bit down. So place is really important on a shelf, and you actually don't want to be the top shelf unless you're selling, alcohol, and there's actually like some sort of prestige level to being the top shelf. It's these nuances that you want to think about, so that way you can actually spew them out as you're giving your framework without going over the 2 minutes. We'll talk about all that if this is overwhelming. Also want to think about with place distribution channels, because if your distribution channel and your warehouse is centrally located, you're going to be incurring less costs because of the places they're all proximal to the warehouse. Whereas if they're distal and they're really far away, then that's going to be an issue because you're going to be incurring a lot of transportation costs, especially if you have an iceberg effect. Which if you've ever taken a class, probably not, but with Marcus Berliant in the economics department, he talks about the iceberg effect, which was where there were, back in the day, in like the 1800s, people would transport meat, and you only had so many, hours or days to get that meat from one cold spot to another on the train, or else it would rot, right? So this is an example of the iceberg effect where the product is actually decaying while it's in transport, and this happens with a lot of goods. Think about coffee beans, think about any type of meat, think about anything that needs to be refrigerated or kept to a really strong temperature or a really consistent temperature. It's just a really unique fact that you should bring up if you have a product that is susceptible to the iceberg effect, obviously called the iceberg effect because ice melts over time. Okay, probably quicker now because of global warming. And then finally, promotion. This is where all of your discounting comes in. So it's a variant of price, but thinking about where are you going to advertise? How are you going to advertise specifically? What do the ad assets look like? Where are these promotional channels going to be held? Are you going to be leveraging affiliates? Are you going to be leveraging paid ads? Are you going to be leveraging discounts at specific locations where you market? What is the PR around the product? And overall, how do all of these discount strategies operate in tandem? There's a really interesting concept that's becoming more prevalent now, which is cleaning the pipelines of your product. So I think the conventional thinking is that you should always price higher rather than lower because it's easier to lower your prices than to increase the prices. That is the retail gospel from the last 10 years. But what we've actually discovered, and something that I think is of incredible use to share in your case interviews if it's relevant, is that people are finding now that having a low entry price allows you to increase your market penetration, which if you take the marketing strategy class, they talk a lot about market penetration versus market skimming. It allows you to increase your market penetration quickly to be able to get the eyeballs, get the attention, get the starting revenue that you need despite more thin margins. But then what you do is you clean the pipeline. So if you're in fashion, you basically change up the entire design and quality and offer it under a new brand or a new label. And because of that, you say it's a fundamentally different product, you can increase your price. Or with cohort, for example, we're offering this service, and we offer the service in cohorts. So every 6 months, we offer it to a class of students. If we wanted to, we won't. But like if we wanted to and people loved the product and we just sell out at $600, well, we could offer the next cohort at $800 and then the next cohort at $1,000. And that would be a viable growth strategy because you're cleaning the pipeline, which means that all of these discounts and all of these current offers no longer stand because you're using time as that factor. If you get in earlier, you get more of a discount. Universities, unfortunately, do this like crazy, and they say it's because of inflation, but we know it's because they just want to increase their bottom line. Maybe I shouldn't say that on here, but like there's a reason that the MBA costs $140,000 now, and it didn't cost $140,000 then. And how they can just easily increase that, they justify it with value. And granted, there is added value to the MBA now, but it's because they clean the pipelines. If you had someone that started their MBA in 2009 and then another person that did it in 2011, but they were both in the same class, even though they joined at different times, there would be a discrepancy, and people would get upset that someone's paying $100,000 and someone else is paying $90,000 for the same product. But we don't get upset whenever we clean the pipeline and then do it. So some interesting fodder there. I hope that all of these mini tangents are useful. I'm happy to get just more to the bare bones. If they aren't super useful, let me know in the feedback on that attendance form. But this is how you make the intangible stuff tangible. So this is how you actually sound like you know what you're doing in casing. The trick is to actually say all of this stuff in 20 seconds, and we'll show you how to do that. Okay. Oh. Next part is going to be Porter's 5 forces. Can we get some participation in the chat to write down some of the 5 forces? This should have been shared in either John Horn's class or Seth Carnahan's strategy class, or whoever teaches these classes now. But those are the classes. Porter's 5 forces. Also, be sure to be taking notes because it's most of the job of consulting is taking notes and distilling notes into really high quality information. Threat of new entrants. That's exactly right. Yep. Suppliers, customers, competitors. Okay. I maybe be a little bit more specific on what those mean, because the specificity is what gets you the offer. So we want to know, I think you're right on some of these, but I want to be what do you mean when you say supplier? Yep. Rivalry amongst existing competitors. Exactly. Yep. And Nikitha's idea on supplier and customers, I know exactly what 2 buckets you're talking about. The question is, how well do you know them? Bargaining power. Great. So let's hop into it. And I'll give you a really quick way, an easy way to remember these, so that way you never have to worry about not remembering them again. Because memorizing 5 things is hard. Memorizing 2 or 3 things is not hard. Porter's 5 forces. You've got supplier power, threat of new entry, buyer power, and the threat of substitution. And then right in the middle is competitive rivalry. Here's how I think about them, so that way I never actually forget these 5. You've actually got a lot of twins happening here. So you've got supplier power, which is the number of suppliers and the ability of suppliers to set the price. And then the twin of supplier power is buyer power, which I think is why Nikita wrote down supplier and then customers immediately after, because they're two sides of the same coin, right? You've got the suppliers on one side, and then you've got the buyers on the other side, and how they're bargaining against each other is ultimately what establishes the price in many ways. Okay, so that's one little chunk. You've got suppliers and buyers. Then you've got new people and old people, okay? The new people is the threat of new entry. And the old people are the established rivals, the competitive rivalry. So this is your other twin duo that you have. So supplier power meets buying power. New people meet old people. New entry versus established rivals. And then the final one, just because I come from an economics background, this comes to mind, but I think of whenever I was learning economics in undergrad, there was a twin set as well, and it was income power or purchasing power and threat of substitution. We always learned about these in tandem, and I'm sure that John Horn even teaches these in tandem whenever he's talking about his managerial economics class. Okay, so the fifth one is threat of substitution, because purchasing power and income, like, that's somewhat rolled up into buyer power. Okay, so really you've got supplier power meet buyer power, threat of new entry meet established rival, and then the final one is that economics little nuance, which is the threat of substitution. Okay, so really you have to only learn 3 pairs rather than 5 whole things. Okay, what do these mean? These are ways in which you evaluate the competitive industry. Whenever you conduct an analysis on the competitive industry, you're going to be thinking about this in the context of Porter's 5 forces. Michael Porter, by the way, is like one of the founders of strategic thinking, and has written a whole bunch of books. And this is one of the books contents that he discusses. The threat of new entry is basically, think about a startup tackling a huge giant in the field, or maybe it's not even a giant. So we would be, if someone was conducting a competitive analysis of cohort college guidance, we would be a threat in that we are a new entrant trying to change one of the features, in that we are lowering our price in order to get more folks in the door, and we can only do that because we've systematized the curriculum and systematized the process of recruiting mentors, and of outsourcing the administrative aspects of the business. And we're not just a bunch of local folks. Okay, that's a threat of new entry. It matters the timing that we're entering. It matters the economies of scale that we have. So we are funded by one of the top venture capital firms in San Francisco. So the reason that there are smart people working on this is one, because we believe in the product, but two, we're making a salary to work on this unique topic. So we don't have to worry about all the admin stuff because it's been outsourced to our umbrella organization. But then also we can focus a lot less on doing this as a part-time gig, and we can do it as a full-time gig. Okay. The added issue of that is that, it's expensive to do that, but there is like both specialist knowledge here that wouldn't exist if you were just doing it as a part-time gig, and a little bit of scale and cost advantage that you get because you are already being supported by a financial giant. Okay. And then you've got technology protection. So think about if they've got new patented technology or intellectual property, and then barriers to entry. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that later. The digital twin of new entry is competitive rivalry. So established rivals. Thinking about how many folks are in the competitive space, what are the differences in quality, what are the differences in those 7 things that Doug outlines, and what are the switching costs, and are people loyal? This is the biggest issue that we're running into in the college admissions space, is that we don't have customer loyalty right now because we are very, very new. And you'll find out in the small business space that it's really hard to sell a service that you can't actually touch. And that if you think about Sergio Chayet's class on Supplier, or on supply chain operations and operations management, cycle time, our cycle time is really, really, really long, right? Our cycle time is 6 months currently. That's the way that we sell the product. But really, it's like 18 months until you actually see the outcome. That's whenever you start to see who gets into what college, and outcomes are kind of what people care about whenever you sell it to them. So that's an issue that our model uniquely faces, is that customer loyalty takes a long time to cultivate, and social proof takes a long time to cultivate. So we have a issue against competitive rivals that have been selling their college admissions guidance for decades, right? Like, we just don't have that. Okay, so that's part of the reason why a low price is actually super competitive, because it almost ameliorates the problem of we don't have trust in the market yet. Okay. Supplier power. So supplier power is talking about how many suppliers you have, the size, the uniqueness, your abilities to substitute, and the cost of changing suppliers. So if you are working as, oh man, let's try and take it back to some of these cases that y'all are studying. Coke, okay? And Coke is a unique supplier of the Coke product, right? The actual concentrate. Well, because of that, and because there are hundreds and thousands of bottlers, Coke can command a large premium whenever they or essentially they can get their bottlers for pretty cheap. And because none of the Pepsis of the world in Sam's Cola and all that can replicate the Coke concentrate, they are a truly unique supplier, and their service or their product is truly unique. And that's where they get all of their margins, and that's why Warren Buffett is, has made billions or hundreds of millions off of Coke stock. Okay, buyer power is the flip side of that, right? So that's how they get power supplying. But then also, if buyers are purchasing a commoditized product, then that often tends to go down in terms of price, right? So there are a lot of customers that need I don't know, like bread, right? And the size of each order. Anyway, there are a lot of good examples. We'll talk about these because bread is not going to be a sexy example. But like size of each order, differences between competitors, price sensitivity, the abilities to substitute, and the cost of changing, right? So like it's easy to substitute between Wonder Bread and some other bread, right? Or it's easy to, no one's going to pay like $20 for a loaf of bread. Because they can, the bread competitors will just keep offering lower and lower and lower prices to stay competitive. Airlines are kind of another example, although now we're seeing a lot of differentiation in airlines with things like Ryanair and Spirit Airlines and Frontier. But they used to be a lot more like perfectly competitive, in that there just weren't budget airlines, so people were fighting on price. That was, 2010. And then finally, the threat of substitution. So the threat of substitution is exactly what it sounds like. Can there be a competing product that is more valuable, right? So airlines, let's say that I want to come down to St. Louis to speak with you all on a panel, or speak with, diversity weekend or whatever, not saying that y'all should like hit up admin, but if you want to talk in person, I would love to do that. So just let them know and put in a nice word for me. But if I wanted to fly there, let's say that I have to pay $400 or $500 round trip. Here's a great example, because let's say I wanted to fly out there today because I didn't plan it, and then they just called me and were like, "Can you be in St. Louis? Can you be at Olin Business School in like 10 hours?" And I'm like, "Bet, would love to do that. Let's do it." Because I waited so long, the price of the flight has gone way up, right? Because I'm now not as price sensitive as I was whenever I had a lot of other options, and I just need to be there now. Like I'm price inelastic, and that would force me to pay like $500 for a round trip ticket. But because of the threat of substitution, I realize even though I would seem to be price inelastic because I need to be there regardless, and it seems like the only way, it's actually not the only way. Because of the threat of substitution, I could drive my car for 4 hours down to St. Louis and be able to have a great time, and I only pay, $100 round trip in gas. Okay, so I'm saving $400. So the cost of change is low because the cost of change would be high for me because I don't have my car in Chicago right now. It's in Kansas City. But if I did have my car, then the cost of change would be low. That's what that means. Okay. How are we doing on Porter's 5 forces? Does all of this make sense? If so, we're going to go into the 8 big buckets now. And we're just going to hammer through them and then get into some questions that I would love you all to answer, and we can really action on this. 8 big buckets. This comes from the book Hacking the Case Interview by Taylor Warfield. I showed this last time, and I think that it's so important to read. It's one of my favorite books on casing, and I would say even better than Case in Point, although you should read Case in Point if you have the chance. But it talks about 8 big buckets to think about, and I'm going to walk through all 8 so that way you can memorize them pretty simply. Okay, it goes from top down. Okay, so you start off with market attractiveness, then below market attractiveness you have the competitive landscape, because every market is made up of competitors. Okay, then all of these competitors are who's the most important competitor? It is you, the company. Okay, so at the broad level, you have the market. The market is made of competitors, so the competitive landscape. The most important competitor that you should really think about is yourself, which is company capabilities. And why are all of these companies operating in the first place? To serve whom? To serve their customers. Okay, so the 4 first buckets of the 8 big buckets are basically just walking down the market itself. So you start off at the top with the market attractiveness, then you go to competitive landscape, then you go to company capabilities, and you end with customer segmentation. After that, I'll even add a 5th thing, since we're not talking about people here, but okay, we have this company serves all the customers. Why are we serving the customers at the end of the day? Maybe it's out of the goodness of our heart, but truly for most for-profit businesses, why are they called for-profit businesses? Because they want to make profit. So why are we serving the customers? It is because of some fiduciary responsibility to make profit. So it's financial considerations. So really, all 5 of these things work in tandem. You've got the market. The market's made of competitors. The competitors are all important, but the most important competitor is the company. The company serves its customers ultimately because it wants to make profit through financial considerations. Okay? Those are 5 that are really important. The other 3 are kind of more tangential, but important to keep in the back of your mind and probably memorize, which is risk and mitigations. So what are some unique aspects of the industry that could come to bear in the case? So thinking about wargaming if you're an economics buff, thinking about patent protection if you're talking about pharmaceuticals, thinking about premiums, thinking about restrictions, IP assets, management competencies, and legislation. A really easy way to think about this, and a top tip that you will get from Trish Gorman in one of her classes, I'm not sure which one, but she'll talk about PEST, which is the ways in which you can evaluate different types of risk in an industry. So PEST, the P stands for political, the E stands for economic, the S stands for social, and the T stands for technological. Okay? So PEST, political, economic, social, and technological. And these are all risks or changes that could affect how the industry operates, which also presents opportunities for you to gain some sort of competitive advantage. If there is I remember the whole NATO conversation that Trump was having a few years ago, and the implications of destroying NATO have a lot of financial effects on free market trade in the Western Hemisphere. So that would be an example of a potential risk, right? So that's political risk. That also has economic implications. Economic risk could be the threat of a recession, or it could be even more industry specific than that, like supply chain issues that we were facing in the last year, and that we're still facing in like the chip market. By the way, like if y'all are watching this whole Nvidia rise, like I wish I got in sooner. So and then premiums, so then social trends. So we'll talk a lot more about social trends in upcoming sessions, but whenever we talk about social trends, something like the rise of TikTok as a social media device has a fundamental influence on how we sell ads and to whom we sell ads. And then technological change, generative AI is like the biggest example right now. This is a huge technological shift, not only in how we produce in our productivity, but then also in how people even trust information that is online now. There's a lot of good changes there. So PEST. The other thing that I want to bring to you all is CAGE, which is another great framework. CAGE are different types of distance that exist in an industry, and this framework is going to be great if you're talking about risk or any just type of industry analysis. So CAGE. C is cultural. So cultural distance, if you're trying to operate in India in a sandwich shop, but you find out that all of your sandwiches that you make in the United States are super Americanized, then you might have some cultural distance and you might not be able to serve them that well. You also, maybe you don't speak Hindi, right? And like they speak English, but like let's say you go to, I don't know, Thailand, right? Like where there might not be as much of an understanding of English, or maybe you go to, well, English is pretty well known all around. So, but you understand my point. Let's say that you are, a Colombian merchant and you were trying to sell in Russia, right? That would be a huge problem with cultural distance. A is administrative distance. So maybe there are a lot of regulatory barriers that prevent you from accessing certain goods and services or certain competitive advantages. So this is really big in healthcare with pharmaceuticals, but then also really big in banking is probably the prime example. If you are trying to build out your new crypto billion-dollar idea, but the SEC is shooting you down, or you're trying to build out a financial technology product, and you want to use a strategic partnership with Bank of America, but you know that Brian Moynihan is super anti Bitcoin and super anti cryptocurrency, then you're going to face a lot of administrative resistance. Okay, CA, cultural administrative. G is governmental. So governmental is actually like being restricted by laws that are in place. So it's very similar to the P in PEST. And then E is economic distance, right? So maybe that is currency exchanges, where the foreign exchange rate for, let's say you're an Argentinian merchant and you're trying to do business in the United States, but because of the flux in the Argentinian peso, you're not able to command as much buying power, or as much, your Argentinian peso is not going to go very far in the United States. Okay, so that would be an example of economic distance through foreign currency exchange. Okay, so that is risk and mitigations. Synergies is about different ways in which you can make 1 + 1 = 3. Things like brand. The reason that Apple can charge a huge premium for their MacBook Pros is because they are Apple. Their customer base, you have the like Mark Zuckerberg had said in his review of the Apple Vision Pro, you got all these Apple fanboys that will just think that anytime Apple steps in, they're going to be absolutely dominating the field. That is a strong customer base. things like infrastructure, headcount. One of my clients in personal training, which is one of my side jobs that I do, he is a executive for Accenture, and really, really nice guy. And he has to work a lot on mergers and acquisitions for Accenture with some of their big companies. And he works on like figuring out what the staffing is going to look like and what does the PMI, post-merger integration, look like. And oftentimes this requires headcount to go down because there are a lot of redundant jobs. So you achieve synergies through those redundancies, oftentimes at the expense of a layoff. But I mean, a lot of these companies get acquired, so they have a pretty nice payday if they have equity. If they don't, again, like, it's part of consulting. You will have to talk about downsizing at some point. Did I? I did not have to do downsizing necessarily, but I did do strategic workforce planning, which was increasing positions for a financial technology organization that was trying to expand into new tech fields, but there was a lot of restructuring. So yeah, I anticipate that that's probably not going super well now with all the tech layoffs. But I don't know. Another important facet of consulting is that you don't always get to see the fruits of your labor because you're moving so fast from case to case. So if that's important to you and that's how you find a sense of purpose and a sense of accomplishment in your work, consulting may not be for you. But if it's not, there you go. And then create your own. So like this could be like a DIY. You could discuss something that is unique to your undergraduate major or to your unique niche. So like I am an economics undergrad and international studies undergrad. So I can speak to a large extent about international politics and how it affects labor markets. I can speak to macroeconomic trends. I can speak to global and local differences. I can speak to platform products because I have a huge interest in building out platform products, so like marketplaces. And maybe that's actually unique as a product innovation for the case that you're talking about. So these are all things that you should feel empowered to build in your presentation. Okay. We're about to get into case questions, so if you are on the chat, like I'm really going to be looking for some participation right after this, and I'm going to make this a quick slide. What are sub-frameworks and when are they used? So we just talked about frameworks at a very high level, and we're going to start to get into like how these manifest in a case, but just know that there are also sub-frameworks to use whenever you are going through quant and creative questioning after the big pause and after you present the framework. And this is a non-exhaustive list, but quite exhaustive on some good frameworks to think about. Internal, external, short-term versus long-term, qualitative versus quantitative, economic, non-economic, domestic, international, revenue, and cost. Okay, so this is like two sides of the coin, and all of these sub-buckets that are just two things are MECE, because you cannot be both internal and external. You cannot be both short-term and long-term. You cannot be both qualitative and quantitative. So these are great because it allows you to give any answer to a simple question in a structured way. So every answer that you provide in a case should be structured. The biggest problem that I see in the qualitative and the creative and the quant questions is that people will get the question and then they'll just start talking in a stream of consciousness. I know that this happens a lot because I've seen it a lot and because I did it all of the time, and it was such a bad habit to break. So I hope that you don't build that habit in the first place by taking this class, because everyone falls into this habit. And the way that you actually don't fall into this habit is that you take 10 to 15 seconds before answering any question to prevent the stream of consciousness answer. So a little expert tip here, take a drink of water to buy yourself some seconds and run through sub-frameworks. Practice dynamic silence and mirroring too. So we'll talk about what dynamic silence means, and we'll talk about what mirroring means in the negotiation and affiliation strategy session. These are really important communication tactics that will enable you to not only buy yourself more time, but to come across as more competent. But if I got a question that was like, what are some unique ways in which you can offer more products for this sandwich shop? I would do this. I would take a break. It seems to me like we want to increase the product portfolio of this sandwich brand because the current sandwich offerings and hot drink and smoothie offerings are not sufficient. Is that right? Yes, that's right. Okay. I want to break this up into two different parts. We've got food and we've got drink. Now you've got your buckets that you've already built out. And I was thinking about these buckets while I was taking my drink of water, while I was mirroring and confirming the question. It buys you like 15 to 20 extra seconds. I know that it sounds a little woo-woo, but it's so helpful in not actually just spewing out, I think that we should offer lattes and coffees and then they'll say what else and what else and what else. And every time that they say what else, your ego's going to be hurt a little bit because you're not going to be able to think on the spot that quickly. So take the time at the front. Also, it sets the pace of the answer. Okay. That was a nice little trick for y'all. I hope that you enjoyed it. Let's go into the first case practice question. So I would love for someone to actually do a live call-in and answer a quick thought of what are the buckets to answer this prompt. So our client is the owner of a gas station based between towns A and B, 10 miles to each town. He's wondering if it would make sense to add a convenience store to the gas station. So let's walk through this one together and then we'll tackle the next one just because I know that it might be a little scary to hop into this. So if I understand correctly, our client is an owner of a gas station between these two towns that are 10 miles to each other. No, excuse me. They're 10 miles to each town, so equidistant. And this owner is wondering if it makes sense to add a convenience store. That was my quick synthesis. Synthesis doesn't really work with something this small, but that's the synthesis. Now you go into the clarifying questions. The most important clarifying question to ask is what constitutes success. So what does that look like in the context of here? This is an investment yes-no decision, which we'll actually tackle an entire case about this. But I would say, what is the metric in which this owner is evaluating for success on whether or not this convenience store should be placed on the gas station? Are we thinking about revenue? Are we thinking about profit? Are we thinking about traffic? Would love to know what this owner is seeking to achieve. And then they'll say something like, increasing traffic or increasing revenue. Great. My next question would be, is this the sole gas station that this owner owns in that there is not another gas station in either town A or B? This is a question around geography to make sure that I'm not missing a crucial piece of information about the overall geographic scope of the owners and the gas station. And then the third big question is the time frame. I don't know that I would actually ask the time frame question here because I don't think it matters. You could be like, are we looking for short-term solutions or long-term solutions? It's a small business, right? I think just trying to get people in the door is going to be important. So then you say, okay, I appreciate all this information. I'm going to take 2 minutes to structure my thoughts. They'll say, yes, great. You start writing your thoughts down and you start building your buckets, okay? If I was going to create buckets here, and I'm trying to do this right on the spot with no writing, but ideally you would do this over the course of 2 minutes. Let's think about what we've used so far. So this is an investment yes-no decision based off of driving revenue. So if the metric of success is revenue, we know that we're going to need to talk about financial considerations, which makes me think that we should use an 8 big buckets approach. And from what it sounds like in the answers of there's no other gas station in town, I would have double checked that, that there's no competing gas station. I would have asked a little bit about the competitive environment. But because of that, I don't want to run a Porter's 5 forces. So I'm going to run the 8 big buckets. What are some things that I can think about? I could think about market. I can think about the capability. Since it's an investment, yes, no, we need to know if they're actually capable of building out the convenience store. And then financial considerations. This is probably like the most basic framework that you could run. Is like, I want to know the market in terms of like how many people are passing through and is it worth it? How many people are we missing? I want to know within our company capabilities, do we have sufficient knowledge to run a convenience store? I want to know if we have the strategic connections to our suppliers to fill the convenience store on a regular basis. I want to know if we have the capital reserve required to build this out, or if we're going to have to issue debt, what that might look like in terms of the issuing of debt. And then finally, want to talk about the financial consideration. So let's get into the brass tacks of how much revenue can we expect to make, and is that going to be a long-term profitable play if we're interested in profit. Okay, so I think I've got a potential answer up here. Great. So on market and competition, talking about market size, growth, customer preferences, and other convenience stores. Okay, so oftentimes if you want to mix your market and competition buckets, you can actually do that pretty simply. No big issue, because people don't really mind if you want like 4 buckets but you don't want it to be 4. You can push those 2 together. And a really important thing that I would actually rattle off if I was like really performing this is SGT. Yeah, so it's actually at the bottom. It's the expert tip. SGT. So you need to know about the landscape of who's coming through and who is going to be stopping at this grocery store. Are towns A and B growing in population? Are they sufficiently large? And are these people that pass the type of people that stop at convenience stores in gas stations? Because if they're all like super neat health freaks, then maybe you don't open up a convenience store. Maybe you open up a smoothie shop. So some really important questions here. Also, like, are they even using gas? If they're using electric vehicles, then maybe that's the reason that they're not stopping. So anytime you bring up market attractiveness, think about SGT. Client capabilities, you want to talk about the experience. How does it look to go throughout this convenience store? Can we provide on like a great user experience that gets them to come back time and time again? Do we have those supplier contacts? And are you going to be running it by yourself? Are you going to contract it? What's that going to look like? And then ultimately that feeds into the final question of like, if they're looking for revenue, I probably wouldn't talk as much about profit. But if they're talking about profit, then I would talk about both the revenue and cost side. What are the COGS on the convenience store? I know that on average restaurants tend to perform, under 10% margins. I don't know about grocery stores, but I do know that Walmart has like a 3%-ish margin. So we'll have super razor thin margins. Is it going to be worth the headache? And is it going to be part of a longer term play? And will it attract new customers in which we can have some synergies that they'll be more inclined to stop for gas if they see the convenience store? Maybe. That is how you would build out your framework. And then you would end with, I am most interested in learning about, and then you would provide your hypothesis. For this example, it would be market. With the 8 big buckets, you normally want to start high level and then go further down, because that's how the case is going to evolve. You're going to get more specific as the questions continue. So I'd say I would be interested in understanding what are the sizes of these 2 towns, and are customers more preferential to convenience stores. So do we have any sales information, or has anyone done any field research on competing convenience stores in the area and what that experience looks like? That would be my hypothesis, and then they say yes or no, and then we go on to our next part. But that is how you deliver a comprehensive MECE framework. Let's do this. I would love if someone would come off of or do a live call-in and answer out this framework. I'm going to give it like 3 minutes, so you've got plenty of time to build it, but if no one answers it in 3 minutes, then we might just not get an answer. So I'm curious to know what you all think. Mentors Are Us is a national nonprofit mentorship organization for students in 6th to 8th grade. In 2008, the organization consolidated its Kansas City, Columbia, and St. Louis offices into Columbia due to financial and personnel constraints. They are now considering re-entering the St. Louis market and would love to know if this opportunity is attractive, and if so, what is the best path forward. This is a sanitized version of a case that I did at ZS during my internship. And all of the names and everything are totally different, but yes, this is a real thing that you would tackle. So to kick us off, I would love if y'all could write some clarifying questions down in the chat. Kind of super low-hanging fruit. We've got those 3 important clarifying questions. Just put them down in the chat. Perfect. What metric defines attractive for the client? So they are interested in... what are they interested in? They are interested in... I'll say that because they're a nonprofit mentorship organization, they want to increase the number of students served. So currently they serve 50,000, and that's way too many. Currently they serve 5,000, and they want to now serve 10,000. And then whenever y'all are ready, I would love someone to come off of, or do a live call-in, and let's walk through it. Let's see what your framework looks like. Speaking of ads, a new set of our ads just launched. So, that's exciting. Do they provide online mentorship or in person? What is their business model? Great questions. I would say they currently do in person, and that their business model is they will let's just say it's like the cohort model, but in person. So they do it in person, and they would do like a 6-month group of sessions with like 2 or 3 folks at a time. So one mentor is assigned to 2 or 3 students. We got 5 minutes. And if we don't get an answer in the 5 minutes, then I guess we just will never know what Mentors Are Us will actually do. I'm okay with this wait because, and I'm actually not going to hop in and give the answer because I'm not a professor, so I don't actually have to I don't have to answer it. But I also think that, it's important to take the risk, because if you put casing on passive, it's going to take a really long time to get good. If you get uncomfortable, it's kind of like doing sales calls. If you just do it the first couple times, you're going to get so good so fast. So, yeah, we got 5 minutes. Hope someone comes off of mute, but if not, I got calls coming up. So just letting you know, we got 4 minutes. I'm expecting a wrong answer, by the way. I'm not expecting greatness. And also, there's not one right answer. Hey.
Hey, I was waiting for others to do it.
I was too. I was like, oh, Daphne, are you going to be the person to come off? I knew you would, but yeah, we'll have to get some other people to join in.
Yeah, I know the first years are about to go to Singapore, so they're probably packing their suitcases.
Yeah. Are these all? Do you think these are all second years right now that are on the call?
Maybe half.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
All right, so one thing I thought about was what competitors moved in when they consolidated and shifted operations out of Columbia.
Yep, that's a really great question.
The next question I was thinking about was what Bukola asked about the success metrics of factor to the going back to St.
Yeah.
And the last question, no, that was really just, I couldn't think of a third one.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's great. These are really important questions. It's what constitutes success for the client, and I had said driving traffic. The second question was around what was the competitive response to pulling out of St. Louis and Kansas City, and these are great. So if I was the interviewer, I probably actually wouldn't give an answer to these, but this is exactly what you should be thinking about. So then that way, whenever you build out your framework, you can answer with confidence, knowing that like you're onto some good thinking here. And the interviewer would probably be like, yeah, those are really great questions. So from there, I would actually build out the framework. And I guess the one thing that I'll leave everyone with on this framework building is that you should always answer in a top-down method. It takes a quick second to build out the muscle here, but whenever you answer, your first sentence should always be, some little thing about your personal association to the case. Like I am really passionate about mentorship and about the services industry, so really excited to dive into this. I have built out 3 buckets for which we can analyze this problem, and hopefully by the end of this we'll have some nice solutions for Mentor RS. Okay, so that's what I mean whenever I say top down, is you say I have 3 big buckets. Then you actually, the next part is you say what are the 3 buckets. So an example of this would be we can look at the competitive response to pulling out of Kansas City and St. Louis, so actually I would say St. Louis because that's what they're considering. I would look at the overall market for students in 6th to 8th grade, and not only the size, but is it growing, and are they centrally located? And then the third thing I would look at is the company capabilities. Are they able to so that would be my 3. I would say, I'm building this like in real time, but I would say here's how I would order it. I would say, what is the market trends for students 6th to 8th grade in St. Louis in terms of their geographic location and in terms of the overall size? What were the competitive responses to the pull out of St. Louis? And what is our ability to deliver in St. Louis? Okay, that would be my next level. So then I'm gonna say, all right, let's look at the first bucket of the what was the first bucket? The market trends. Then I would say, here are my subpoints. I want to know if the 6th to 8th grade student population is growing. I want to know how centrally located they are and if they have access to our facilities. And I want to know if there is a trend towards one-on-one mentorship, or if there's another operating model that's being favorable in St. Louis. Then let's take a look at the competitive response. I want to know if the market as a whole decreased because competitors didn't step in and fill the gap, or if competitors did fill the gap and there's actually a finite pie of students that are interested in this, so we're going to have to claim market share. I'm not super worried about that because we have a rolling demographic in that the 6th graders or the 8th graders of this year will be 9th graders, and that means that the 5th graders of this year will actually be completely new, so we'll have a new pipeline. Not too worried about that. And then the final thing that I want to know is our business operating model capable of re-entering St. Louis? Do we have enough cash on reserve to institute another office? What was the reason that we closed down in the first place? And do we still have that problem? And if we do, can we ameliorate that problem? I want to know if we're open to virtual offerings, if we can actually reach the market without having to be in person. And if we are in person and it is truly an issue of unit economics, because I suspect it is, if we're not getting the right amount of grant funding and we're just doing one-on-one or one-on-two or one-on-three mentorship, can we bundle up these students to where we actually serve 12 students at one time or 15 students at one time, and we are able to do like some virtual complement that reduces our cost structure? And then also, do we have grant writers to increase our ability to fund this? Ultimately, I want to know what the market looks like at large to see if it's even worth it and if we can actually hit the impact that we want. But then we're going to have to really dive deep into the nuts and bolts to understand if our company can fulfill the market need. That is how you would deliver a framework. You start off with the 3 buckets, you go into the subpoints of each bucket, and then you loop it back at the end with a hypothesis about where you should start. If it is the correct hypothesis, you get brownie points. If it's not the right hypothesis, it's actually like no harm, no foul, because you took a risk. So we're really good on like getting those first questions. Now it's just building out the framework, and I'm excited because we've got 16 sessions to figure out how to do this, but I know from the chat, like everyone's mind is in the right place. So we've got the knowledge. We just got to figure out how to lay it out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Great work, Daphne, and great work to everyone that was in the session listening. And I will call it a day here, and we'll get started next week on quant and mental math, which I know is a super important topic. So I hope that people can attend. I don't know if Singapore time is going to make that weird, but we can hope for the best. All right. I will call it a day. I'll talk to you later.